farms are very, very complex systems, and very often we have to equate the health and safety implications for staff against the local environmental challenges that are faced. And that's when we really have to know our client and say, well, yeah, OK, this is going to cause a major risk to staff, but what are the long-term effects? And what are the chances of the risk of pollution because of it? And, of course, vice versa.
Of course, cows themselves produce waste, lots of it. Like the silage runoff, the liquid waste, slurry, is drained into special tanks. The solid waste is also collected and transported across the dairy unit to be stored in a special concrete enclosure. Any liquid component within this waste can drain through the enclosure to be collected in the slurry tank. In fact, the collection of waste isn't only a safety measure. Prudent farmers have always known the benefits of this waste as a farm nutrient. At certain times of the year and in designated places, the slurry and manure can be spread on fields. The balance for the farmer is to get the goodness of the waste into the soil, but not through the soil into any streams or rivers.
The river's just over there with the line of trees, and here we have the slurry system. So it's absolutely vital that we manage this system according to all our procedures to avoid any pollution incidents.
Well, of course, I mean, you've got to manage the risk, haven't you? And that's really what it's all about, because any runoff into a watercourse is going to have a detrimental effect, and it's also going to be very, very expensive. The farm in itself is its own discrete environment. If you look at the situation whereby you're growing crops as cattle fodder, and of course what comes out the other end in vast quantities has to be stored and carries the risk of major pollution. And how do you deal with that? How do you store that before you actually put it back on the land to grow more crops? And that's where we need a good knowledge of agriculture and of the agricultural year to be able to provide the advice that we're giving. Right, so presumably you're feeding the cattle on maize silage as well as other sorts of forage?
Yes, grass silage, maize silage.
Right, and this crop's not far off cutting, what, about a fortnight, something like that?
Yes, 2 to 3 weeks. Yes, we use maize as a feed crop with the cows as well as grass for silage. Another advantage with growing maize is that it gives us land that we can dispose of slurry in the winter. But we have to be careful because of the close proximity of the river and to the dairy unit, and be careful of surface runoff of slurry.
Yeah, and you've got a natural fall going down to the river as well, and the sort of soil where it'll actually go through and appear in there.
That's right. So what we don't spread any with it. We leave a standoff between the river, and so we don't spread any on the headland.
Yeah, and of course, looking at your soil type, you're only going to have certain windows in the year when you can actually spread slurry, because some of it's going to pool at various times of the year, and the rest of the time it's going to percolate through and, of course, end up in the watercourse.
Brooksby follows a carefully surveyed plan of spreading. The different coloured areas on this map of the farm show the quantities of slurry that can be deposited at certain times of the year. The careful management of land, produce and waste completes an agricultural cycle. The maize crop has received waste from cows to encourage its growth. In a few weeks, it will be harvested and cut to make feed for the cows right through the winter.
So harvest's just finished and you've got a New Holland. How old's this one, Andrew?
It's about 10 years old, and we've had it for 5 years, and we're due to change it next year.
Right, and how much are you cutting every year?
We're combining about 500 acres, and so we can't really justify a new combine, so we buy one 3 to 4 years old. We also have radios in the cabs, and radio cassettes in the cabs, and we also have CB radios to try and overcome the problem of people spending 12, 14 hours on their own not communicating. So all our workers can communicate with each other on the CB radios, which breaks the monotony a little bit.
And of course, one of the problems in agriculture, of course, and it always has been, it always will be, is lone working. Yes. Which is a safety point of view in itself. I mean, you hear of a lot of accidents where someone's been found 2 to 3 hours later because they've been working on their own and they're out of touch.
That's right. We've got an obvious problem here with inadequate facilities, and we'd just like your recommendations to how to alleviate them.
Right, well, you've got two problems here. There's a fire hazard and there's also a pollution risk. The fire hazard brought about, it always seems to be a good idea to mop up waste oil with sawdust, but of course the chances of combustion from that are pretty great. So I'd advise that you either mop up with sand or with oil-absorbent granules that you can buy now. You've probably got more sand around than oil-absorbent granules. The short-term angle, use some of the plastic drums, chop them off and put them under the taps, so if you're going to get a bit of a leak, it drops into the plastic container, and look at a long-term bonding situation.
The majority of the farm is the other side of the road with
the open dialogue. We're working with them. It's in some cases almost a hand-holding relationship of come on, you know, we'll do it together, and helping them look at their risks, helping them assess the risks, and helping them formulate effective and cost-effective control measures. We have to be aware of the needs of the community, of the needs of agriculture to be able to do that. And you've got what, wheat, barley and rape?
Yeah, wheat, barley and oilseed rape.
In grain stores, there are a number of potential hazards, some of which are immediate, while others, like dust and noise, are more insidious.
OK, Andrew, can we switch everything on? Looking at the basic grain dryer, there are various problems that we have to equate the risk one against the other. There's the risks of noise when wheat and barley are being moved. We're also looking at fencing, we're looking at use of ladders. Grain produces a lot of dust, it builds up on motors, so there's a fire hazard. And we're looking for planned maintenance of electrics, we're looking at dust clearance. And we're just looking at the whole concept in total. We can't take it in isolation. All right, over a time exposure of 8 hours, you're running between first and second action level in here. And you have a decision to make about a hearing protection zone. One of the major problems in grain drying, of course, is the dust, and this is an age-old problem which has now been recognised, and grain dust has been assigned a maximum exposure limit because of the occupational ill health and the incidence of alveolitis and farmer's lung, which isn't exactly a new disease. Helping the farmer take on board proactive management of safety can have wide-ranging implications, not just on humane management, but particularly on good financial management. Planned maintenance, planning what you're doing before you start in a health and safety context means that the accident may not happen at all. You put a stop to it before it even starts.
As we move forward into the future, more and more of the people that are now working in agriculture are college trained, and obviously a major part of their college training is health and safety management and managing the environment. So as an industry, I'm confident that our health and safety record will improve as more of these trained operatives work within the industry.
In the past, farmers were pressurised into producing more and more food for a growing population. Now that's changed. People are now more concerned about how their food is produced, and that it is produced safely and securely and without damage to the environment.
It's a nice change. It's a welcome change. No one wants to see anyone hurt, but also we want to see that agriculture remains viable. Agriculture is Britain.